Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try to say something about the great painter Vincent van Gogh, and among other things, his painting Starry Night. But before I get into the details of that, let me first quickly say something about Van Gogh himself first. Okay, so Vincent van Gogh was a Dutch painter who was born in 1853 and died in 1890. Incredibly, his artistic career lasted for just 10 years. He was prodigious, though, in his output, producing something like 800 paintings in just 8 years, and then 70 paintings in the last 70 days of his life. Now, in 1889, plagued by depression and illness, Van Gogh committed himself to a mental asylum in France, and it's there, in his lucid periods, where he painted, among other masterpieces, Starry Night. Now, like several of Van Gogh's paintings of this period, Starry Night pulsates with remarkable energy and rhythm. It has become one of the most famous paintings in the world, of course, even though Van Gogh was considered a failure in his own lifetime. On July 27th, 1890, Van Gogh walked into one of those sunny wheat fields that he knew so well, and he shot a bullet into his chest, or so the story goes. Van Gogh died 2 days later. He was just 37 years old, and nobody took any notice of his death. But he's now, of course, become one of the most famous painters in the history of Western art. Okay, well, so that said, before I get into the Starry Night in particular, let me just try to first frame the discussion in a somewhat larger context. Okay, so Jean-Baptiste Chardin, a great 18th century painter, I think did something sort of unusual as a painter. What he did is he mostly painted his own possessions. What I mean is that the objects in his paintings were basically everyday objects with which he lived. You know, the things which adorned or just lay around his house. He'd paint these same things, these same simple things over and over again. Things like cups and card tables and saucepans. And actually, it's interesting. Chardin is mentioned in Proust's great novel, In Search of Lost Time. Now, in a chapter there, we get a young man who can only seem to find consolation in the majestic ideas of beauty depicted in the famous works of art in the Louvre, where you get all the paintings of the fancy palaces and the wealthy princes and so on. Well, at some point, the author tells the young man to follow him to another section of the Louvre where the paintings of Jean-Baptiste Chardin are hanging. And there he would realize that there is beauty, not just in majestic events and in people like that, but in normal objects at home and in everyday activities like in making dinner, for example. Okay, now modern art, and Van Gogh is included here, I think expresses just this sort of turn to the seemingly mundane and everyday. It was a turn away from traditional, grandiose academic painting and instead a renewed focus on common life and reality. Now, this is in part what we see in Van Gogh. I mean, we get depictions of things like a worn-out pair of shoes and a rustic chair and sunflowers, right? Just to name a few things. Okay, but here's the really amazing thing about Van Gogh. He doesn't just depict these things as they are. No, he paints them with an intensity never before seen in the history of art. As one commentator put it, through his imagination, he invests objects in a way that goes beyond the limitation of our ordinary sight. And in so doing, he Well, he allows us to look at the world as though with completely new eyes. He transforms how we see the things around us. Now, maybe one way of expressing what it is exactly Van Gogh does or manages to achieve is like this. He seems to draw transcendence out of the immanent. Actually, this is something the philosopher Rebecca Hansen has recently talked about, but also in their own ways, the great thinkers Karl Jaspers and Martin Heidegger before her. So the idea is something like this. Traditionally, we've sort of carved up the world into two groups, namely the immanent and the transcendent. So what we've meant by the immanent is what is concrete, what's here, the earth. In other words, all that's contained within the world. And what we've meant by the transcendent, on the other hand, is what's beyond us, what's not given in experience. So the idea here is that there's this dualism, right? There's the stuff of this world, and then there's a separate divine reality. And what's more, because there's this higher divine reality, the stuff of this world has often been denigrated or is looked on as kind of second grade. Okay, now the idea is that many traditional paintings, even if they're depicting something concrete, what they're doing is they're ultimately pointing beyond themselves to a greater, more divine reality. In other words, it's ultimately about something otherworldly. It's about transcending the immanent. Well, okay, so this is not what we get in Van Gogh, though. No, he emphasizes the immanent, the stuff of this world. And remarkably, he draws out of them more than they appear to be. In other words, he draws out the extraordinary from the ordinary. Now, that's what I mean when I said, following Rebecca Hansen, that he draws out transcendence from the immanent. So this isn't the sort of hierarchical concept of transcendence that I was talking about. You know, one where you have a distinct higher and a better reality that the artwork is intended to point us towards. No, I think Van Gogh breaks from this sort of dualism and the sorts of distinctions that end up downplaying the material world. Actually, it's the opposite. He privileges and celebrates the material world. This is a mostly this worldly transcendence. In other words, in Van Gogh's paintings, we get a world that's busting at its seams, pregnant with a kind of beauty and power and fervor that's often reserved for the divine realm. Van Gogh reminds us that the world can give us a lot more than we routinely think if we just stopped and took a look around. He reminds us that what is beyond is already in the things around us, in the olive trees and the night stars. Okay, now it is true that many have viewed Van Gogh's Starry Night as expressing his religiosity. And maybe there is some truth in that. But actually, I think it's complicated. I mean, it's well known that Van Gogh had abandoned conventional religious belief at this point in time and had undergone a kind of a spiritual crisis. But I also think it's pretty clear that the one thing he didn't lose was his sensitivity to suffering, something that he did see reflected in religious writings. And I think that he did believe that it was possible to find consolation, to restore the soul in the midst of suffering and the necessities of life. And so, I don't know, something tells me that this is what his paintings are also partly about, maybe especially the Starry Night. That is, they're emblems of consolation. But again, here's the important thing. in their depiction of natural objects, I would say that these paintings don't ultimately point us to a separate divine realm. No. The source of their power of consolation is to be found in this world, in the beyond of this very world, in the shimmering, palpitating overabundance of being spilling at its brim, from the dynamic cypress tree to the swirling, dancing astral bodies. This is a celebration of natural energies. If anything is exalted and consecrated and re-enchanted, it's nature. You know, Van Gogh did say something pretty revealing. He said that if I have a terrible need of religion, I just go out and paint the stars. Well, thanks, Vincent, for teaching us that it's all right there in that twinkle of the great starry firmament. Bye for now.